What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and at long last I have come through on my promise to analyze Zofia's primary weapon options and to put together another loadout meta video. When Zofia was added to the game during Operation White Noise, the choice between her LMG-E and M762 rifle was not really a choice at all. Back then, the LMG class in Rainbow Six was quite simply garbage. The weapons had high recoil, low rate of fire, mediocre damage stats, extremely slow aim down sight and reload times, and really, the only thing they had going for them was a large ammo capacity and maybe somewhat of a coolness factor. Back then, players would pick an LMG simply for the lulz, but a lot has changed since then, and the weapon class as a whole has become far more viable. So the big question now is, what about Zofia's LMG? Can it stand up to the M762? Well, time to find out. As always, let's take a quick look at the overview of all of the relevant stats concerning these guns, and as you can see, things are not looking all that great for the LMG-E, since most of the stats are just that tiny bit better for the M762. But let's examine things step by step to get a clearer picture. Hey, it's me again. My friends over at Drop, formerly known as Massdrop, have sent me another little goodie box, and this time it contained probably the fanciest keyboard I have ever owned. It's their CTRL or Control mechanical keyboard, and it is fascinating. Let me give you a closer look. Out of the box, this piece of hardware is already really impressive. The anodized aluminium frame is really pretty, but also gives the keyboard a solid quality that you just won't get from a plastic keyboard. You have the option of Cherry MX, Kaihua and Halo switches, and the hot swap sockets give you the option of always customizing the keyboard in future. And speaking of customizability, on the Drop website you will find a QMK firmware tool that will literally let you customize everything about your keyboard in absolutely any way you want. Each and every single key on the keyboard can be reprogrammed or assigned additional functions with multiple different layers. If the 60-odd pre-programmed color scheme permutations are not good enough for you, you can even set up your own visual look down to picking the exact color you want for each and every one of the 87 keys, as well as the 32 LEDs present in the bottom strip. As always, I've checked the reviews of the product and it currently sits at over 4 out of 5 stars based on the reviews from 379 customers. The keyboard comes with free shipping and free 30-day returns within the US, and if you use the link in the description below, a $20 discount will automatically be applied to your next purchase with Drop. So whether you're in the market for an amazing mechanical keyboard or just want to see what other awesome products Drop have on offer, go ahead and click the link below. In terms of the raw damage, there is actually no clear winner. The LMG has a flatter damage drop-off curve because of the 40-meter range and also more damage at long distance, while the rifle is more powerful at close ranges up to 27 meters. So the conclusion in terms of raw damage per shot would be that the LMG is more suitable for maps with long sightlines, but how many maps does that actually mean? We know that Siege is an incredibly close-quartered game where the average kill distance is less than 10 meters, and if we take that into account, then I would say that despite the damage of each gun seeming quite well balanced, the close range damage of the M762 will most likely be the better option in most situations. The fire rate of both guns is extremely similar, 720 RPM for the LMG and 730 RPM for the rifle, and as always I tested the fire rates in-game for myself to be sure that the stats are accurate, and they are. As you would expect, once we combine the fire rate and damage to calculate the damage per second, the very similar fire rates mean that we end up with a result that strongly reflects the raw damage per shot. The M762 is better up to 28 meters, after that the LMG-E can do more damage. And interestingly, the benefit that each gun has over the other is pretty much exactly the same. The rifle does 10.26% less damage per second than the machine gun at long range, and at short range, the machine gun does 10.22% less damage than the rifle. To me, those differences seem too closely matched to be a coincidence, and while this won't really mean anything in practice, I still thought it was an interesting discovery nonetheless. Now, as always, DPS stats are the quick and easy way to compare the effectiveness of two different weapons at various ranges, but really what everything will boil down to in practice is the shots to down or kill and the time to down or kill for each individual gun. At ranges up to 25 meters, the M762 is of course better with its greater power and minimally faster fire rate, but for most cases the advantage is so small that it will never make a difference. In 3 of the armor and strike location permutations, the rifle requires 1 less shot to down or kill, which means around 86 milliseconds less to down or kill a level 3 armor with body shots and a level 1 armor plus rook plate with body or leg shots. For all other cases, the average benefit the M762 gets is only 3.68 milliseconds, and here's an added bonus fact for you. It takes between 100 and 400 milliseconds for a human to blink, and that means the average TTK advantage of Zofia's rifle over the machine gun in most cases is between 1/27th and 1/100th of the blink of an eye, so basically nothing at all really. At longer ranges, after complete damage drop-off, the differences are a bit more significant. As you can see, in most cases the LMG-E will require 1 or even 2 shots less to at least down an opponent, and despite the minimally slower fire rate, the time saving in these cases is between 74 and 156 milliseconds, with the mean average at 92 milliseconds. Only for level 2 armor body shots and level 1 armor leg shots do both guns require the same number of shots, resulting in a 5 to 6 millisecond time saving for the M762, so once again, practically nothing. What does all this mean? The most frequent combat ranges in Siege are below 25 meters, and despite more power and higher fire rate, the M762 gets no real advantage here against most opponent types and shot placement locations. Longer ranges are far less important, and so the small advantage that the LMG-E has here could offer a tiny benefit in the occasional engagement, but those situations would be rare. Conclusion? I would say that in terms of their pure takedown capabilities, the two guns may look quite different at first, but really they are very well balanced. But of course there are other factors to consider. In terms of capacity, there's no argument that the LMG-E is the clear winner. It has 5 times the capacity of most rifles, and the 150 bullets you get to play with will easily allow you to ace the entire enemy team without even having to reload, or of course, alternatively, you can use that ammo to lay down excessive amounts of pre-fire or breach walls. You may occasionally even be able to trick your opponent into thinking that you have to go for a reload, and when they peek you, you still have 120 bullets left to really spoil their day. Long story short, more ammo equals more good. Just make sure that you get out of the habit of reloading every time you've fired more than 7 bullets, because of course that completely defeats any advantage you could hope to gain with the LMG. As is to be expected, the higher capacity of using a belt rather than a magazine comes with longer reload times, and like with most other belt-fed LMGs in Siege, the tactical reload time is actually a little slower than the reload from empty because of the extra step of pulling the remaining belt out of the gun before removing the ammo box. Compared to other machine guns, these reload times of 6.5 and 7.1 seconds are not actually that bad, but they are still double or more compared to other weapons in the game, and 7 seconds can be an eternity when you're getting pushed by a defender. Of course, the disadvantage this poses is nowhere near as bad as it could be due to the fact that in Siege, we can cancel the reload at any time, so as long as you keep yourself topped up at convenient moments throughout the round, you should be 100% Gucci. Other luxury fashion brands are available. The M762's reload times are pretty much as average as you can get for the rifle class in Siege. 3.3 seconds is the exact mean average for rifle reloads from empty, and 2.6 seconds is the mode average for tactical reloads, although this is 100 milliseconds slower than the mean average. Added bonus fact!
Statistics.
Most people will be familiar with the mean average, the sum of all values divided by the number of values, but there are 2 more types of average that can be useful in statistical analysis. The median average represents the midpoint of your data range, so for example, in a range of 7 values, it will be the 4th largest and also the 4th smallest. And then we have the mode average I mentioned before. This is the value in your data range that appears the most often. So applied to our Siege example, the most common tactical reload reload for assault rifles is 2.6 seconds, even though the mean average is a bit quicker at 2.5 seconds due to the fact that the data is a little skewed by the ridiculous 2-second reload of Jackal's C7E. So my conclusion on capacity and reload time is that once again, everything seems pretty balanced between the two options open to Zofia. On the one side more bullets, on the other quicker reload. Now, something I've never really tested or explored in past loadout meta videos, but something that many people have commented on, is that LMGs should have an advantage when opening sightlines through soft walls. And that makes complete sense. Back when Rainbow Six introduced caliber-based destruction, I tested it and found that the LMG class as a whole had larger bullet holes and larger impulse hole sizes than most other guns in the game. And so I was quite surprised when I did a side-by-side comparison of the M762 and the LMG-E and found that even here they are pretty much balanced. I guess the larger 7.62 by 39mm caliber of the rifle helps here, and when you use up all of the ammo of both guns, you pretty much end up with the same amount of soft wall destruction. The LMG-E still has a bit of an advantage because you can basically go through the entire 300 round ammo reserve with only one reload, while the M762 will need 7 reloads for 241 shots. All in all though, I would still be cautious about using up large amounts of ammo just to create sightlines, and a single mag from the rifle can open up 3 impulses in a standard drywall, and if that doesn't give you enough of a sightline, then I don't know what will. Long story short, even here both guns seem perfectly balanced. So far so good, but power is nothing without control, and the final question we need to address is how easy it is to acquire your targets and keep them in your sights with each of the guns. Aim down sight time has always been a key weakness for the LMG class. When you're suddenly confronted with an unexpected enemy, taking an extra 100 to 200 milliseconds to aim in can pretty much hand the victory to your opponent. The M762 comes with the standard ADS time for rifles, and this is 100 milliseconds faster than that of the LMG-E. This is a clear win for the M762, but I do want to point out that it's once again maybe not quite as bad as it seems on paper. As you can see in my test footage here, the LMG-E does take the full 550 milliseconds before the ADS animation is complete, but if we're going to be realistic here, we could argue that at around 500 milliseconds, the sight picture you get is pretty damn not bad already, and the minimal movement you get off of those last 3 frames really doesn't impact your ability to fight all that much. So even though the ADS disadvantage for the LMG-E is 100 milliseconds on paper, you could argue that in practice it's more like 50 milliseconds. Still an advantage for the M762, but as long as you develop some discipline in terms of pre-aiming before peeking an angle or pushing an opponent, the disadvantage of the LMG-E is by no means a deal breaker here. Hipfire spread is a relatively low impact stat because hipfiring in Siege is pants. But the hipfire spread you start out on when aiming also affects how soon you can get a decent accuracy when you open fire before having fully ADS'd. So yes, it's a low impact stat, but still worth considering. That being said, the differences in hipfire spread between Zofia's guns are actually very subtle. In most stances when stationary, the spreads are basically identical, and it's not until you start moving and/or shooting that the disadvantage of the LMG-E comes to light. Nevertheless, this round again goes to the M762. And finally, last but not least, how easy are the guns to control once you start firing? As you may have seen in the overview earlier, I decided not to include the in-game recoil charts in this video because sadly for a small number of guns in Siege these charts are inaccurate, and the M762 is one of them. As you can see here, adding the muzzle brake to the gun supposedly has a profound effect on every single bullet fired, and that's just not how the attachment works. It's almost as if the in-game chart was created for single fire rather than full auto fire. So forget the charts, we're going straight into my in-game test results. I ran a simple test with both guns without controlling the recoil, and my conclusion from this test is that the M762 has a bit more vertical kick, while the LMG tends to wander to the sides a bit more. These results were consistent both with and without attachments. As a side note, the reason I chose the compensator for both guns in this test is because it is the best muzzle attachment for long bursts, and so it suits this experiment the best. The results make it pretty clear to me that the M762 is the easier gun to control, because pulling down on your mouse or even pushing a control stick forward a little in order to counteract recoil is something that can be practiced, but when a gun has a tendency to veer off to either side at random, that's something you can never really be prepared for. The only thing you can do is to try to react to the random recoil element as best you can, and that's just never quite the same as building up the muscle memory to counter vertical recoil. I ran a further test where I did my best to control the recoil, and I set up both guns with the vertical grip and either the muzzle brake or compensator, and these trials essentially confirm my previous conclusion. Keeping the LMG down in terms of the muzzle climb is not all that difficult, but the gun has a real tendency to wander left or right, resulting in a much larger impact pattern. And with just a tiny bit of practice, the M762 becomes really easy to control, giving it just one more advantage over the machine gun. And so to summarize, the M762 is a truly mediocre assault rifle in Rainbow Six Siege. Okay damage and slightly below average fire rate, completely average reload times, but pretty controllable. The LMG-E surprisingly manages to hold its own throughout most of the comparison, despite being one of the weaker LMGs in the game. But at the end of the day, faster ADS and better controllability still make the M762 the ever so slightly better choice in my eyes. And yet nevertheless, the overall balance between the two guns is actually pretty good, and as long as you take advantage of the greater ammo capacity and mitigate the slower ADS time, the LMG-E can pretty much serve you just as well as the M762. And that's it, my detailed breakdown of the loadout meta for Zofia's primaries. Which of these guns do you prefer to use, and which guns do you want me to analyze next? Leave your comments below, and with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.